Welcome to the Realtor Who Wines podcast. I'm Rashelle Newmyer, your hostess with the mostest, a student of life, a connector, a passionate wine enthusiast, and your local favorite guide. Join me as we explore the vibrant Pacific Northwest, savor the finest wines, and champion the spirit of entrepreneurship. Each episode, I'll sit down with inspiring guests, supporting business ownership, and uncovering the stories that make this community unique. So grab a glass of wine, settle in, and let's embark on a journey of discovery and connection together. Cheers! Cheers! Welcome back to the Realtor Who Wines. I'm Rashelle Newmyer, your host, and the realtor that just freaking loves to wine. This way, not so much this way. Today we have a special episode for you. I'm coming to you live from one of my listings in the Bull Mountain Tigard area. I wanted to do a little solo episode because I get asked a lot of questions about being a realtor, about the market, about buying a house, about selling a house. So I thought it'd be really fun to showcase this listing to you. I would definitely recommend that you go check out Realtor Rashelle on Instagram or the Realtor Who Wines on Instagram to see this house at its full capacity. There's a couple different reels there, or of course on YouTube, there's a whole walkthrough of the house. But today we'll also give you a little sneak peek of this beauty that I'm standing in. So, cheers. Thank you for being here. Today, I'm excited and sad to share with you the wine that I'm drinking. It's a Grenache from a winery that was in Newberg, Oregon, DeStaff Wine Co. But they recently have decided as a family to do a different adventure. So they just closed. But I still have some bottles left, and I thought it'd be fun to share with you while we chit-chat about real estate. One of the questions I get asked every day as a realtor is, how's the market? And that's always an interesting question because there's no direct answer. If you ever ask an agent or a realtor, how's the market? And they say, great. That's weird. That's an interesting response because why are you asking about the market? What is it about the market you want to know about? Are you curious how the market is for buyers? How is it for sellers, condos, land, leasing, flips, investment properties, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, mid-term rentals? They're all different markets. So that's why that question's a little bit more complex. As a whole, right now we're filming and recording in May 2026. And something that's really interesting about the market in general right now is we're kind of in a really balanced market. It's not really a seller's market or a buyer's market, but the buyers feel like it's a buyer's market because there's more inventory, and the sellers feel like it's a seller's market because there's still a supply and demand issue. So even though we're seeing inventory go up, especially out here in the Portland and Salem metros in Oregon, the demand is still high too. There's not enough homes on the market for everybody looking for homes, but there is more inventory. So buyers feel like they have a little bit more negotiation and wiggle room, which is true, but sellers are also not wanting to give up as much. So it's been really interesting to see the conversations that are happening in between buyers and sellers through their agents, of course, because that's why you hire representation, is to help guide the whole process. And what I mean by that, as far as the interesting conversation, is buyers are paying top dollar right now for properties because of the appreciation that we saw during the time of the lowest interest rates we've ever seen in history in 2020, 21, and then maybe a little bit of 22. When the market started to shift, interest rates went up. But during that time where interest rates were really low, appreciation really shot up. So houses are selling even more, or for even more than they have been in the past. So buyers are, really wanting to buy, but also they're trying to make sure they're getting a good value because they're paying so much more. Sellers, on the other hand, saw their friends and colleagues and family members' houses go for $50,000, $100,000 over because of all the bidding wars that we saw while interest rates were low. And they're still hoping to get some residual of that. And that's just not realistic for the market that we're in. So my first seller tip, if you're a seller out there or somebody thinking about selling your house, my first tip to you is to price right out the gate. If you price too high because you're trying to catch the wave that's already passed, of when people were paying absolute top dollar during those low interest rate times, your house is going to sit on the market a little bit longer than it normally would if you priced it right out the gate. As a buyer, be honest with yourself and have those conversations with your agent. Is this house priced right out the gate? Because if it is, you shouldn't come in and also ask for a million things from the seller. So that's what we're running into right now, at least in this area, is that buyers are asking for the world and offering under asking price, and then sellers don't want to give the world and want you to be closer to asking price, and sometimes they want the price to be a little bit higher than it should be. So it's been this really interesting dance. The truth is the truth. I know that what I just said isn't always favorable to sellers or to buyers, but if you really do want to get on a home, especially a home that you love, you're going to want to not like compromise, but just be realistic. And also, how would you feel in that position? That's a conversation I have with my clients a lot. If we came in under asking because we already could tell the house needs a new roof, so we say like, hey, your home's on the market for $650. We know it needs a new roof. We're offering $625 up front because we're going to have to replace the roof. During the inspection period, it's unrealistic to say, oh, we want you to replace the roof when you've kind of already had the roof conversation. Does that make sense? So like, you don't want to come in, offer low, and then turn around and offer basically or ask for the same thing for what you already offered low on. And it just frustrates sellers too, because they're also turning around most likely and trying to buy. So they're trying to walk away with the most equity that they can so they can make their next purchase. So again, right now it's interesting that it's a more balanced market. So buyers are getting in homes, sellers are selling homes, buyers are seeing concessions. For those of you that don't know what concessions are, that could be like sellers helping pay closing costs, buyers agent fees, or doing some sort of replacements like roofs or HVAC systems, something like that. And then sellers are still getting top dollar for their homes as long as they're priced right and on the market, show ready with its best foot forward.
Your home might be worth more than you think. Curious what your equity looks like? I'll run the numbers for you. No pressure, just clarity. Please reach out anytime. Let's look at this together.
With all of that being said, today on this episode, I'd like to share with you some seller tips if you happen to be somebody looking to sell your house, currently selling your house, or just even thinking about it. And then I'll follow it up with some buyer's tips as well. So I want to be able to provide information to both sides of the transaction today. So let's start with seller tips. One group of clients that I tend to assist with is people selling their first time home. So they've never sold a house before. They don't know anything about selling a house because the only part of the transaction that they've experienced up to this point is being first-time home buyers. So the first few things I always tell those clients, and this also works for anybody that has sold a handful of houses, but you just might already know this information, but it could be a good refresher, is first impressions are everything. I know that your home has been a great home for you. It's a very exciting first-time home buyers. This was a home you maybe built a family in or became a family in, or just growing in general. Like you bought this because it's what was within your budget before you had different promotions and life changes and things like that. So it's hard sometimes to see our home as a product, and so we change it into a house. When you're getting ready to go on the market, you have to think of your home as now a product. And so that's why I like to use the word house when it's being sold versus home when it's being purchased, because you are going to live in it and turn it into a home. But right now you're selling it, so you're turning it into a product. And the first thing to do to make your product stand out better than the others is to showcase it better. So one tip I always give first and foremost to sellers is to declutter. Make the space a little bit more bare so that when a buyer comes in, they can really visualize their stuff in the area. Will my couch fit in here? What will my kitchen table look like? Where will my pictures hang? Sometimes what happens is if you don't take down family photos, not that you have to take them all down, but if you come into my house, I love pictures. I love social media. I love showcasing big moments. So if you come into my house, it's full of pictures. If I was selling my house, I wouldn't want buyers to get distracted by my pictures, and then they're picturing me and my family living in my house versus picturing themselves. So that's what I mean. It's a little bit more psychology and helping the buyer visualize themselves being there, having coffee in the morning, having dinner in the evenings with their significant other or family or friends, you know, or even like, where's my catio gonna go? Where's my fur baby gonna live? So you really want to make the place as much of a blank slate as possible. It's a little bit harder to do when you're still occupying the home, but it's still doable. We don't want you to be unrealistic expectations where for picture day, for example, like the kitchen I'm sitting in, there's nothing on the counters right now, right? So, but if you were living in this house day to day, there might be a soap dish here. There might be a dish towel right here. There might be something else on the counter. That's okay. But just trying to put your house best foot forward is the first step of selling a home. It's just getting the home itself ready. Another thing that some sellers like to do is have the home pre-inspected. It's kind of an unpopular opinion within realtors that some love when sellers have the house inspected before it goes on the market. Excuse me. Others don't. But sometimes it's nice to know what's going on with your home and what to expect. Some things you can get in front of and take care of if you know that what's happening. We don't spend a lot of time in our crawl spaces or our attics or looking at electrical or things like that. So it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes on your home, and you can fix certain things before you go on the market. Also, then when a buyer has a home inspection, things aren't going to pop up and surprise you, and you're not going to be caught off guard that there might be something in the attic that we don't want going on in the attic, or something in the crawl space that you weren't expecting or didn't want to deal with. So there's not as many financial surprises if you get the home pre-inspected. One thing to consider being a seller too is obviously who you partner with to market your home. So definitely partner with a realtor you know, like, and trust. Sometimes you reach out to the agent that helped you get into the house as a buyer. Sometimes they've moved on. They're no longer in the industry, depending on how long you've been in your home, or sometimes they've relocated themselves, or sometimes they're a buyer's agent. Sometimes people in our industry specialize on one side of the transaction. Others do both. So just have those conversations. Have a list of questions, like what's important to you. I always tell my clients to ask if they're going to interview multiple realtors, like, how do you plan to market my home? What's your 30-day plan? What happens as soon as it goes live on the MLS? Do you have a strategic plan to market my home, or are you just going to post a sign and pray someone calls? So there's a couple different, strategic things that realtors, not a couple actually, there's quite a bit of things that realtors can be doing to strategically market your home to the right buyers in the right area, and the right price points, right? Because we all have our own budgets. So just asking those questions, what's their communication style? And think about what's important to you as a seller. Do you want your agent reaching out to you weekly? Do you only want them to reach out if something's going on with the house? If there's an offer or questions? So a lot of my clients tend to like constant communication, and I like to provide that too, because it also just gives them peace of mind knowing what's going on, because they're not with me all day at the office or out and about with showings and doing things like that. So I like to just keep them in the loop when I'm running ads for their home, or reaching out to agents, or having one-on-one conversations with agents about if this home's a good fit for their clients, scheduling showings, especially if the home's vacant, because they're not getting alerted every time that the house has a showing request. So just keeping your clients in the loop. And if that's really important to you, ask those questions when you're interviewing agents. Like, what is your 30-day plan, your 60-day plan? When would you do a price adjustment? How long would we be on the market before you would talk to me about a price adjustment? What kind of marketing do you do? Just all of those questions will really tell you if it's a good fit for you and that realtor. Then first and foremost, edit that out. And then lastly, as a seller, knowing your transition plan, like, where are you going? How does that look to sell a house and buy a house at the same time? I help a lot with relocation. So I'm helping people move into Oregon as well as move out. Obviously, I help a lot of the locals stay local as well. But sometimes you're relocating out of the state. So your house may be on the market while you don't live in it. Sometimes you're living in it or you're in the middle of moving. So just having those conversations and having a plan with your realtor will really help the whole process goes more smoothly. But start thinking about if you're selling your house because you want to downsize, you want to be on a smaller commute towards work, you want a little bit more land, you decided you want a mini cow. P.S. I would love to have a mini cow. So that you're trying to like go outside the city limits a little bit more. It's like whatever the reason is that you're moving, think about those goals and also like what do you want your next home to look like? And then normally it's more favorable to go under contract if you're selling your house once your house is under contract. Contingent offers are still being accepted. It's just hard to be a little bit competitive with non-contingent offers, especially if you're not under contract. So especially my sellers that are super excited to downsize or upsize, I always say, we'll be perusing the market, but let's not like fall in love or be hardcore looking at stuff until your home's under contract, because I really want you to be able to be competitive and really get that house that you truly want. And if something pops on the market that you love, of course, we'll go see it. We can always try and throw our hat in the ring, but I just want you to be prepared that we aren't as favorable, especially if there's multiple offers, which we are still seeing, even though I said earlier it's a balanced market, depending on the property and how rightly priced the property is, the location, all the features of that property, we're still seeing multiple offers on some homes, while others we're not. So if we were to be offering on a house that already has multiple offers, we're not as favorable if we're contingent and we're not even under contract yet. And I just don't want to set you up for disappointment. So I like to have those conversations up front. And it's just something to be mindful as a seller, depending on what your next transition looks like, to just have that in mind, that you'll probably won't go under contract on what you're buying unless there are options to like buy and sell at the same time. Sometimes people take a HELOC out on their home so that they can do a down payment on another home, move out while this home sells. But a lot of times you're selling and buying all kind of simultaneously. It's just harder to do until you're under contract with your current house. If you ever have questions about selling your house, it doesn't matter what state you live in. I love being a real estate resource. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer your questions to the best of my ability, especially if you're not in my state. But I know realtors all over the world, so I'd be happy to also connect you with somebody that if I can't answer your question, I can help you get the answer that you're looking for. All right, so those are just some of my little tips and tricks for sellers. Like I said, reach out with any questions, but now let's like transition a little bit to the buy side of things. So if you're a first-time buyer, hey, congratulations, that's so exciting. If you're even thinking about buying a home, it's one of the best ways to build wealth. It's proven, it's science, it's facts, it's history. One thing I always say to first-time buyers is, a lot of times at a barbecue or something, I'll hear, oh, I'd love to buy a house maybe next year. I'm going to try and pay off some credit, or I'm going to try and pay off my car, or I want to wait until I'm done with school, or whatever. My very first response to you always is, have you talked to a lender? Because it's really beneficial, even if you truly do want to wait a year, to have somebody look at your finances, look at your current credit score. And the other, like a myth, I should say, that people don't realize is they think when you start talking to a lender, they're instantly going to do a hard pull on your credit and you're not interested in that. That's not the case. You can have a consultation with a lot of lenders and just basic knowledge that they can get from you. They can at least give you an overall picture of what you should be doing with your finances, with your credit score to get you in the proper position to buy a house, so that it's easier when you are trying to go through that process. Some people also think like, well, my credit score is 580. I'll never qualify for a house. That's also not necessarily true. There's a lot of different, especially here in Oregon, programs for first-time home buyers that help with lower credit scores, help with down payment assistance, but you wouldn't know any of that unless you met with a lender. If you don't know of any lenders or you don't even know how to get connected with one, I love being a resource. It doesn't matter if you're in my state or not. I know some great professionals all over and would love to connect you with them. So please reach out. You can send me a DM. a message, a text, an email, whatever, and I'll get you connected with the right people to at least start having the conversations to get you moving in the right direction. I always say it's hard to know where you're going if you don't have a map. And that's what the lenders tend to provide us, is a map to get you in the proper position so that you have a successful real estate transaction. So even if you're just even remotely thinking about buying, even if you're like, it's probably not for me for 5 years, still, it doesn't hurt to have that conversation now, to just have a true idea of what it looks like and maybe what you would want your finances to be. Also, the other thing that surprises a lot of people is they think like, I'm gonna cancel certain credit. Like, I've had this credit card. I got this credit card in college. I never even use it anymore. I'm going to cancel it. Sometimes the lender might tell you not to do that because that's a really long, if you're like me and you've been out of college for quite some time, but you opened a card that long ago, that shows a long-standing credit line and it actually helps your credit score. So even though it doesn't have a balance or anything, by closing it could actually lower your credit score. So just stuff like that is like why you would want to talk to a lender up front to make sure you don't accidentally damage yourself from a credit score standpoint or an ability standpoint. So please reach out to me or reach out to a lender if you happen to know one. The other part of the process is once you're pre-approved, the thing that a lot of first-time home buyers specifically don't know about is the difference between down payment and closing costs. Because they all kind of happen at the end of the transaction, a lot of people group those together. There is a difference. So a down payment is specific to your loan and how much you're putting down to get your loan payment where you want it to be and to qualify for that mortgage itself. Closing costs is something different. It has to do with property taxes, county fees, escrow and title fees. Sometimes closing costs include your agent fees if you're paying for your agent out of pocket, or your agent services, I should say, out of pocket. If the seller isn't covering that for you, you can ask throughout your offer. Not throughout your offer. When you make your initial offer, there is a part, especially in Oregon, again, keep in mind, I'm an Oregon licensed realtor, that you can ask the seller, just like to pay closing costs, you can ask them to cover your buyer's agent fee, but sometimes buyers pay for it out of pocket. So that would also be part of your closing costs. So they're two different buckets. Both buckets get handed over towards the end of the transaction, but they are two different things. Some of the money that you need up front at the beginning of the purchase would be earnest money and then money for inspection. Because you can't wrap earnest money into your loan. You can't ask the seller to pay for earnest money and the seller's not paying for inspections, and you can't wrap inspections into a loan. So even if you do a down payment assistance program, you're still going to need some cash in your pocket to accomplish these things. Earnest money, and this is pretty true across the board, so it doesn't matter if you're in Oregon or not, but earnest money is basically you explaining to the seller you're super serious about buying their home. It's kind of an initial down payment that will later get swooped into the bucket of your down payment or closing costs. You can decide where that money is going to go as you close the transaction, but at first, it's you telling the buyer or the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm super serious about this house. I'm going to put $5,000 down right now to show you how serious I am. The seller gets access to that money if you were to back out for any reason that doesn't have to do with something with the home or financing changes, things like that. So the only time I've been a realtor for 8 years, and the only time I've ever had a seller get to keep the earnest money, I've had it happen twice. One, I was the buyer's agent and my buyer got cold feet the day of closing and just panicked and said, I don't know, my gut's telling me not to buy this house. He can keep the earnest money. I'm so sorry. And I don't want to buy the house. So the seller got to keep the money in that regard because the buyer backed out at no fault of the seller, no fault of the home, no fault of financing, nothing like that. The other time it happened was there was the seller, or I was representing the seller. The buyer didn't do, within the loan you have to, or within the contract, you have to do certain things for your loan to keep the loan contingency active, and they faulted on the loan portion of their responsibilities of the contract and ended up backing out. It was at no fault of the seller, no fault of the home. And because the buyer didn't do it within a certain time frame, and it was an unrepresented buyer, so he didn't have somebody guiding him on the other side, he did fault on the contract, and he did end up forfeiting his earnest money. So that's 2 examples of how you might lose your earnest money, but 9 times out of 10, knock on wood, that it comes through at the very end of the transaction and it goes towards your down payment or closing costs. And then the other thing that you pay for out of pocket up front right after you're under contract is home inspections. Definitely always recommend home inspections, even if you're buying new construction. A lot of people assume, and this is no like shade on new construction by any means, but some things still pop up. Sometimes the vapor barrier isn't down all the way, or only half the vapor barrier made it down. With new construction, even if it's one builder, a lot of times they're using a variety of contractors to build that one house. And they don't always have eyes on each contractor every minute of the day. So it's just nice, again, to have a fresh pair of eyes looking at the biggest investment that you're probably going to make in your life and just making sure everything's dialed in and is the way it should be. So whether you're buying resale or new construction, I highly recommend that you get the home inspected. Even if you're buying it as is, you still need to know what you're buying.
When you're ready to make a move, make it with someone who knows the market and truly cares about your home journey. I would be honored to help you each step of the way. Don't forget to reach out.
So I recommend it. On average, inspections can cost anywhere from $500 to $600 to $1,200, depends on the size of the home and what all you're having the inspector look at. Sometimes there's extra inspections if you're buying property, like a well inspection or septic inspection, things like that. So again, partner with your agent. They'll guide you and tell you, depending on the home that you select, what inspections are really important. In Oregon, we have a natural gas called radon, and it comes up through the soils and it can be cancerous. It's odorless. So like you wouldn't know it's in the house unless you had the house tested for radon. So a lot of times, and it's like $150 to like $200 to get your house tested for radon. And so a lot of people do that during the inspection period too, just to make sure that no natural gas is coming into the house from outside that you don't realize. So those are like some of the things that you'll need money for up front to pay those inspectors during the home buying process. Other than that, really, first and foremost, get educated. And the best way to get educated is partnering with somebody that you trust. We are seeing, with the rise of AI and of course Google, very informative. It does provide a lot of great information. But AI is also pulling from a wide variety of sources, and we don't always know if those sources are credible. So it's definitely good to just like double check with somebody that is in the industry, that is doing this every day in and out. But the number one thing about selling a house or buying a house is being educated and then being partnered with somebody that you trust to get you through the process. So those are just my little bit of tips and tricks today on selling a home or buying a home. And then I would love to showcase to you the listing that I'm coming to you from here in Bull Mountain, Tigard area. Definitely stay if you're watching on YouTube. Watch and we'll give you a little sneak peek of this listing. If you're listening, please go check us out on YouTube or Instagram. Like I said, on YouTube, it's Realtor Rashelle. On Instagram, you can find me as Realtor Rashelle or as the Realtor Who Wines. I can't wait to see you next week. Thanks for listening and watching. Cheers.